What's going on, ladies, gents, and kids of all ages? It is Eric coming back at you once again from the Nerd Cave, and I just want to start off by saying thank you to all those folks who came out and showed their support on the giveaway video. Got a ton of views on that on the live gameplay, so super appreciate you guys, and appreciate all of the continued love on my deck list videos. We're going to be talking about not one, not two, not three, but 4 deck lists in today's video, and we may have an honorable mention as well at the end. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into talking about the absolute best decks, in my opinion, to play for the Inklands Set Championship. If you didn't see the video with the giveaways, I did do 2 giveaways for Enchanted Beast proxy cards, sets of 4 for each person, have not been claimed yet. So go check out that video if you haven't yet and you're somebody who entered the giveaway. You may have actually won something, and if not, it's a great video. The first deck we're going to talk about today, and it's important to note that these aren't in any particular order, is going to be what I'm referring to as Sleepy's Steel Song, but it's that Steel Song deck. DeCandio played an Order 66 version. I have reduced it down to only 62 cards, so we're still playing over 60. Couldn't decide what else to cut in those last 2 spaces, but I'm pretty happy with this deck list overall. As you can see, we're still going in on the 1-drop Cinderellas, Queens, and Robin Hood, so pretty similar to what we're seeing in the meta currently. Not actually playing any 2-drops other than Songs and the Sleepy's Flute. So no 2-drop characters, and then we're jumping in to Ariel. Ariel is a fantastic turn 3. You really want to be able to drum up as many songs as you can, and she can sing every song in the deck. So that is ideally the card you want to see on turn 3. Really, in most matchups, you want to pretty aggressively mulligan for Cinderella and Ariel if you can. There's certain matchups where you may be looking more for something like Benja, maybe in the Sapphire matchup, but Ariel and Cinderella are generally good cards to see in your starting hand. Doc is another great card, comes down for 3 and can make your guys a little bit cheaper, so he kind of replaces Lantern in the deck since we're playing a Sleepy's Flute version as opposed to the Lantern version. And then we do have Benja to deal with that item removal, Rapunzel to heal your characters and give you some additional card draw, the Queen to deal with those locations and to deal with some of those larger characters. She can just be a menace, a big threat on the board early. She can also sing every song in the deck very early in the game, so Queen is fantastic. We have the Beast for more additional card draw. It's a big reason we're playing Rapunzel in the deck as well, because the Beast can take some damage and end up getting shut off. So being able to play something like Rapunzel to heal him up is very important so that you can continue to get card draw not only from that Rapunzel, but now from your healed Beast, unless they're able to put more damage on him or kill him another way. Obviously, Madame Medusa is a threat to pretty much every card in this deck with the exception of the Queen, but that's just kind of a risk you're going to have to take. You can take her off the field pretty quick when she hits, and some people are switching back to Tremaine, which is just a threat for everybody. Then we do have Robin Hood. Robin Hood is fantastic, being able to shift him out on turn 3. He can also sing all the songs in the deck. When he challenges and banishes something, he's going to gain you 2 lore, which is fantastic. He's still getting the lore he would get from questing by banishing something, and if he takes damage, you can heal him with Rapunzel, so you can go ahead and heal him back up, draw some more cards. The synergy between the stack of characters here, it just kind of speaks for itself. I am still running 2 Be Our Guest. You've seen some people cut this card entirely. I think it's kind of useful for drumming up those characters at certain instances. It's also another hit for Ariel when you're looking for a song if you don't hit anything else. Bare Necessities is a card I've talked about time and time again on this channel. I think it kind of speaks for itself at this point, but in addition to be able to pull all of those songs out of your opponent's hand, can also hit locations. And one of the things that's incredibly relevant in the meta right now, because we are seeing a lot of Sapphire Steel and Sapphire Ruby, is it can take their Fishbone Quill a turn before they can play it, or even 2 turns before they can play it if you do have Cinderella out and you're going first. Fantastic card. Can't say enough good things about Bare Necessities, and it's inkable. Frankly, I don't know that that card should have been inkable, because it's just that like menacing when it happens. One World's Greatest Criminal Mind. I would argue that this card could be cut entirely. The biggest things you're going to be answering with it are going to be things like Maui, Maleficent Dragon, Cinderella, which isn't seeing as much play in the meta right now, the big Cinderella Stout-Hearted. And obviously there are some other cards that you can hit with it that are going to have 5 attack or more, but those are the big ones that come to mind for me right out of the gate. 3 Let the Storm Rage On, 3 Strength of a Raging Fire, pretty much a must. Both great, both singable with Cinderella. As Let the Storm Rage On draws you a card, so again, that card draw is really relevant because you're going to be dumping your hand pretty quick in a lot of instances, hence the 4 whole new worlds in this deck. Strength of a Raging Fire. Why we're playing a lot of 1-drops, not as many 2-drops, but we have a lot of 1-drops, so we can go ahead and fuel that Strength of the Raging Fire early in the game and be able to have it dealing 3, 4, sometimes even 5 damage. Almost acting as an Along Came Zeus to characters, but it's singable by Cinderella, which just makes it really good. And then we do run 2 Along Came Zeus to help deal with those locations and those big pesky characters. Obviously, it is singable by Rapunzel, the Queen, the Beast, and Robin Hood. So being able to sing it is great. And then we do still run 2 Grab Your Swords. There has been an argument for cutting Grab Your Swords from this deck entirely. I think aggro could be something that we see during the set championships. I think a lot of the decks are kind of mid-range or higher, and aggro could just come in and fire right underneath them and take everybody by surprise. So I think having that Grab Your Swords to board stabilize if you are playing against aggro, it's going to be well worth it. It is not inkable, so you do get kind of stuck with it if you're in a board position where it's not good. Hence why we're only playing 2. Whole New World speaks for itself. It is like Wheel from Magic. It's going to make you and your opponent both discard your hands and draw 7 new cards. Super relevant if you can get any kind of resource lead on your opponent. So for instance, let's say your opponent has 3 cards in their hand and you have just the Whole New World left. It may not feel great to put 7 new cards in your opponent's hand, but in reality you're making them throw away 3 resources while you're using your last one. So it is technically gaining you card advantage because you are using your resources, whereas their resources are just going into their discard pile when they're getting the 7 new cards. Even better if you can sing it and use some of the cards that you're getting out of those new 7 right away to just further your board position. And of course the last card, Sleepy's Flute, kind of speaks for itself. Exhaust it and gain 1 lore if you played a song that turn. My build of this deck is running 23 songs, so the ability to play a song pretty regularly is quite high. It's less character oriented, more song oriented than some of the other builds you'll see. A lot of these builds are running 18 to 20 songs, but I really like where this deck is at personally. If there's anything you would do differently, or if you think Steel Song is just not competitive in the meta going into set championships, drop your comments below. I'd love to hear your opinions. And the second deck we're going to talk about today is going to be Ruby Sapphire. We haven't been seeing Ruby Sapphire win as many tournaments as some of the other decks that we're going to talk about, but in the $10,000 Pixelborn tournament that just happened, we did see Ruby Sapphire in 5 of the top 16 spots, none in the top 8, which I think is worth noting. I don't know if this is the deck to bring to win the tournament, but if it's piloted skillfully, I think it's entirely possible. There are other iterations on this deck list, running things like the Small Gaston, the 4-2 with Reckless, and there are definitely other tech options you could go with, but my build is going to start off with 4 Queen of Hearts, incredibly important in the early game. The rush can be a surprise to your opponent. I think people are a little more aware that Ruby Sapphire is teching her in currently, but people can still open themselves up in certain instances to that attack. Sometimes they just have to sing with Cinderella, and then you're able to get that Queen of Hearts down and take their Cinderella off the board. So we do jump right in with 2 cost cards. The only 1 cost card we play in the deck is going to be Lucky Dime, which obviously is an item. Play it. You get to draw a card. You can sacrifice it to heal one of your characters for 2, or you can obviously sacrifice it to Hiram Flaversham to go ahead and draw 2 cards. We're not playing so much into the recursion until you get to Tamatoa, so you're looking to get to 8 ink to get Tamatoa down and start recurring the popsicles, but it is entirely possible. And then we are also running 2 Judy Hops, not so much to get rid of our own items, which is an option if need be, if you're not seeing those Hirams and you just really need that card draw while establishing a threat on the board. She does quest for 2. But she's great for getting rid of your opponent's items since we don't have access to something like Benja, since we are playing the Ruby build of the deck. Then do run something that's a little outside of the norm. It's not something I see everybody run, but we're running 4 of the Mickey Mouse. They're a little more aggressive. They do take from your top deck, so they're not taking cards out of your hand. And they do give you another quester and another body on the field, which is something Ruby Sapphire can struggle with in the early game. Not necessarily trying to load up the board always super early, because a lot of times you're going to want to be prepared, but it can help you keep up with lore or just keep your opponent from questing and instead dealing with your characters. And we do have 3 copies of Belle, Strange but Special. I think there's definitely an argument for playing 4 copies of Belle, but with this build, I went ahead and went with 3 since I am less focused on gaining all that additional ink and more focused on controlling the board. So a little less rampy than some builds that you may see with the 3 1 jump ahead, 3 Belle, but we do have the 4 Mickey. So we do definitely have some ramp. We're not playing the small Grandma Tala anymore. Really all she ever does is come out and become ink. We are playing the 4-drop Grandma Tala, who I think is pretty good. She gets you some additional card draw, which is cool. Hiram's going to be additional card draw. Maui speaks for himself. He just comes down and really controls the board. 6/5 rush and reckless. Comes out and deals with most things. It can also deal with locations particularly well, especially if you have that Maui's Fishhook on board. Able to give it +3, giving it 9 attack. It can take out everything, including McDuck's Manor. Then we do play 3 Tremaine, 3 Medusas. I think this is the right count of these cards. Personally, I do think there could be an argument for going to 4 Tremaine, 2 Medusa. I like Tremaine more, but a lot of people like Medusa, so I went with 3 and 3 for this build. Then we have 2 Gastons. There are some builds that run 3 or 4 Gastons. This build is already on 20 plus uninkables because of things like Mickey Mouse that are helping you ramp in the early game, so it's a little more aggressive there, and we're letting go of a couple of the Gastons in light of that. And then we do have the 3 Tamatoas, able to recur items, able to quest for a bunch, able to come down and then see a Lucky Dime, possibly the following turn when you have 9 ink, able to gain whatever lore Tamatoa has at that time. So if you have some items on the board, you can maybe gain 4 or 5 lore with Lucky Dime, and if you can't use it with Tamatoa, you might be able to use it with Belle. Then we do have 4 copies of Maleficent Dragon in the deck. Comes down, takes out a target. Personally, I think Ruby Sapphire is the only relevant deck to run Maleficent Dragon in now. I think when it comes to Ruby Amethyst, she's just too slow. There's better tech options currently. We do have 3 copies of 1 Jump Ahead to help with that ramp. It's something else to do on turn 2 if you don't have your queen. So just another 2-drop to throw in the deck. If you don't have something else to play, being able to ramp for 1 ink is well worth it, because then you're going into turn 3 with the ability to play Flaversham or Grandma Tala or Belle, but you wouldn't want to play Belle then. And we're also running 4 copies of Be Prepared. Be Prepared wipes the board, super worth it. Reestablish, kind of reset everything. Then we have the 4 copies of Popsicle I mentioned, 2 copies of Maui's Fishhook, which is great not only for being able to deal extra damage with characters, but it's great just to be able to give something evasive until your next turn to prevent them from killing it with one of their characters and saving it to be able to do something like Quest to kind of round out the end game. 4 copies of Fishbone Quill to be able to ink extra cards. I do think the Mickeys and the 1 Jump Aheads are worth it, because since you're not with the Ruby Sapphire build, unless you're hitting something like Hiram or something that's really going to let you draw a lot, you're not playing something like Whole New World like you are with the Steel build, which is great in the Steel build because then you can fishbone everything out of your hand in Whole New World, so that's fine. In this, you may want to be using the fishbone less aggressively, maybe only a couple times, and then sacrificing it to Hiram. So we went with other options to create ink. And last card in the deck, we are running 3 McDuck Manor. McDuck Manor has been a great tech option for Ruby Sapphire. It's an awesome card to play before or after playing a Be Prepared, because they're probably not going to be able to take it out right away unless they're playing Maui and Maui's Fishhook, in which case they might be able to throw Maui down, fishhook it, and kill your McDuck Manor. But that's most likely going to be happening in the mirror match. The third deck we're going to talk about today, and the second most winningest deck in large tournaments currently, based on the amount of players that entered, is going to be Emerald Steel. This is a deck that's on a lot of people's radar. It is an incredibly expensive deck to build. You're looking at like $500 to $600 minimum to build this deck, because in my opinion the deck really needs 4 Beast Tragic Heroes, 4 Robin Hoods, and 4 Ursula Deceiver of All. That in and of itself is, I think, pretty close to $500, and then the other cards kind of round that out. But you're looking at 4 Cursed Merfolk, make your opponent discard, quest for 2. It's better than Lilo, better than Maleficent. You don't need attack. Those characters never attack. Fantastic card. Captain Hook, another fantastic card. This deck really has some great 1-drops. Captain Hook, being able to take out pretty much everything else that's going to come out as a 1-drop. In a lot of instances, being able to take them out favorably is incredible. Then you do have 3 Robin Hoods just as a shift target for the large Robin Hood, 3 Flynn Riders as another way to quest, and another mechanic kind of like Curse Merfolk, where they're going to be able to make your opponent discard if they want to challenge into him. 4 Morph. Since we are playing 11 shiftable characters, Morph can be really good. He can also create a little situation at the beginning if you do something like Robin Hood and then Morph. Which one do they take out? Because you're still going to be able to shift Robin Hood if they can only take one of them out. And we do have Ursula Deceiver to go ahead and rip those songs out of your opponent's hands to prevent them to do dealing with what you're doing on the board. A lot of your characters do have 1 or 2 willpower in the early game, so they're kind of easy to take out, so being able to rip a song out of their hand can be well worth it. Smee's fantastic, almost like Mim Snake, 3/3 for 2, but instead of having to bounce a character to your hand, you are just going to take 1 damage at the end of every turn if you don't have a captain on the board. If you've been able to establish Captain Hook turn 1, there is no penalty for it, so in a way, kind of better than Mim Snake, which is a card that's been really valued pretty highly. So Smee, I think, is a card that's just going to be on the up and up and continue to be good, especially as more captains hit the meta. Who knows if we get a captain that's going to be actually really good, kind of like Captain Hook, that's just going to make Smee curve out fantastic. I mean, obviously, John Silver, the 3-drop John Silver with the location boost is really good with Smee, but it's really specific to that Ruby Steel pirate deck. We do have 3 Kick Cloud Kickers to just kind of keep the tempo. He can almost kind of time walk your opponent when you're able to get their last turn's play off the board back into their hand and slow them down, especially if it's something that's uninkable. They can't even really benefit from using it as ink, which can be really funny. Ursula Deceiver of All comes down, sings those songs multiple times. We are running several songs for her to sing in the deck. We do have 2 Strike a Good Match to be able to draw some extra cards, 2 Mother Knows Best to be able to return some of those characters to their hand. Returning 2 characters to your opponent's hand can be absolutely vicious. 4 Let the Storm Rage On to be able to deal 2 damage. If you're singing it with Ursula, you're dealing 2 damage twice and drawing 2 cards. Again, absolutely gross. Then we do have 4 Strength of a Raging Fire. We got a lot of low cost characters in this deck, so this is another situation where you can get that Strength of a Raging Fire going off for 3, 4, 5 damage sometimes. And then we do have 2 Along Came Zeus and 1 Whole New World. There's an argument to play 0 Whole New World or more Whole New World in the deck, but frankly, since you are kind of at least semi-teched into making your opponent do some discarding, Whole New World's not really something that you want to have to play if you can avoid it, and that's why we're only running 1. It is kind of the nuclear option for the deck if you've just been totally slowed down, your opponent's drawn a ton of cards, they have board advantage, and you're really falling behind. It can be a great kind of reset button to get back into the game, especially if you have something like Beast Tragic Hero or Robin Hood on the field that can sing it, because then you're going to be able to play those cards that you're getting right away. We do also play Benja to deal with items, and Jafar to give us some additional card draw. Jafar Dreadnought, that is. Whenever he banishes a character in a challenge, he goes ahead and draws you a card, so he's fantastic. He's also something I think people really kind of don't expect coming off of a morph. They're expecting the Beast, they're expecting the Robin Hood. When you hit him with that Jafar, they're like, huh? Like, what just happened? Did not see the Jafar coming. And then, like I mentioned, we have the song package that I already talked about, but Emerald Steel, just a really beastly deck. And it's important to remember that Ursula doesn't have to sing all of your songs. You do have things like Benja and Kit in the 3-drop slot that can sing. Jafar can sing Along Came Zeus. And then even Strike a Good Match, you can be singing with the Ursula, the Morph, the Flynn, the Smee. So you got lots of options for singers in this deck and some great songs to sing with them. I think it's an awesome deck. Its matchups are generally pretty good. Probably the second best deck in the meta. I'm not going to talk too much about the matchups with decks against other decks, just because it is largely dependent on how the deck is teched. Like, if you tech your deck to play against Steel Song because you play against Steel Song all the time, you're going to have a pretty good matchup against Steel Song, even if you're playing something against like Ruby Amethyst that typically doesn't have a great matchup against Steel Song. But if you're not teching your deck to go against that deck, you may have a really bad matchup. Or you may be playing a deck that normally has a great matchup, but you've teched it to go against something else, and it's gonna have a bad matchup. So it's really important to kind of speculate on what your local people are going to be playing. There's not a clear-cut best deck. There's decks that are going to challenge other decks in the meta well. There's tech card options that are going to challenge other cards in the meta well. But I don't think there's the best deck. So make sure you're thinking about what other people might be playing. If you're playing somewhere that you play all the time, are people going to be playing the decks they play every week? Maybe. Eric just cut in and interrupted myself real quick to say if you want to come and hang out with us for the store championships, we are signed up for 4. We'll be playing at Versus Games in Oviedo on Saturday, April 20th. That's at noon. We're going to be playing at Gem Mint Cards in DeLand on April 21st at 1 p.m. We're going to be playing at the Cloak and Dagger Into the Inklands Store Championship in Ormond on April 27th, and the Kingsway Collectibles Into the Inklands Store Championship on April 28th. Both those last two on 427 and 428 are at noon, but definitely come and hang out with us if you have some time. And the last deck we're going to talk about is a little bit different than the build that I'm going to be running. It's a little more in line with the builds that I've seen some people posting and talking about online, but I think it's a pretty cool deck. Ruby Amethyst, top competitor. I know people are sick of hearing about it, sick of seeing it, but because it is inexpensive to build, coming in generally at under 200 bucks, maybe a little over 200 bucks if you're playing the Maleficent Dragons, because it is inexpensive and affordable and accessible for people, and so many people had built versions of it and just had to tweak a few cards going into new sets. A lot of people have this deck, so it sees a lot of tournament play. I do think that's relevant in the numbers that it puts up. It is a deck that's continually able to slow down opponents and gain control in the late game and win in many matchups. Steel Song can be rough for it. Some of the aggro decks can be a little too fast and go under it, but it is consistently the top rated deck in the meta across the board. So we're going to talk about some of the potential options. There are 2 different versions of this deck. We're going to be looking at the more aggro oriented version. There is another version that runs things like Minnie Mouse and Olaf with Teeth and Ambitions to be able to deal with the early threats using that combination. Also a fantastic option. But in the more aggro version, we are looking at 3 Chernabog's followers, 2/1, so it can deal with those 2/2s that come out like Robin Hood if they want to quest in with them. And if they don't, and you're worried about Robin Hood taking you out, you can not only quest and get that lore, but you can get your Chernabog off the field so that the Robin Hood can attack and kill it and gain 2 lore in the process. We do have 4 Rafikis. Rafiki's just purple Captain Hook with 1 less attack. He still has the same the same attack with the Challenger because he's Challenger +3, Hooks +2, but he has 0 attack on the defense, so he's a little give and take, but he's an Amethyst, so he's playable for us. Then we do have 4 Kuzco. Kuzco is a great option to keep your foot on the pedal. You don't always want to be playing Snake and bouncing that first turn play back to your hand, so being able to play something like Kuzco that's not only going to come down and keep the pedal to the metal, keep you gaining lore, but if your opponent does take it off the field, you're going to be drawing a card, so he replaces himself. Then we do have the 4 Snakes. I think everybody expects to see 1 Pinocchio just as a tech option to tap down your opponent's characters and get those cheeky kills. You can also bounce him back with something like Snake and Fox to be able to recycle that ability and tap down more characters. That is when Pinocchio is at his best and when he's really shining. We do have 4 Mim Foxes. Deals with so many things. If you come down with a Mim Fox and bounce a crab to your hand, you can actually attack in for 7, dealing with things like Queen's Castle, Maui, Maleficent Dragon, some of the biggest threats in the game. Surfer Stitch sits one defense outside of it, so you'd have to attack it with a second character. Being able to get that up to 7, bouncing the crab, is always a really cool play. 3 Sorceress Maleficent to be able to continue to draw some additional cards. 3 Crabs to be able to boost up some of your smaller characters can be really funny with something like Kuzco, making him attack for 4 when your opponent doesn't expect it and taking out a threat on their side of the board and drawing yourself a card. Crab is also very good with Minnie Mouse to deal with evasive threats, making her a 4 attack and take down things like Evasive Genie, which is seeing a little less play in the meta right now. But some of your biggest evasive threats are going to have 3 or 4 defense. Some are slightly higher, but that's typically the biggest you're going to see on a lot of the relevant evasives, so it does give her the ability to deal with those. She's also just a great quester and can in a lot of instances be used to sing friends without being able to be challenged into after the fact. Then we do have the 4 Goats, an absolute must. Same deal with the Rabbit. Draws you a card when it comes, draws you a card when it leaves. If you're bouncing it, drawing, bouncing, drawing, you can do all sorts of shenanigans with it. Then we do have the 4 Maui's absolute must in this deck. I already talked about it in the Sapphire Ruby deck, so I won't spend a lot of time beating a dead horse, but it does deal with locations for you extremely well. It does deal with most characters on the board. He's kind of meant to come down, mess stuff up, and go in your bin. Then you do have 3 Lady Tremaines dealing with your opponent's characters on the board, getting them off of the board and out into the bin. Madame Medusa dealing with direct result removal, so could be made an argument that she is better than Tremaine. Madame Medusa can't be removed by herself. She is able to target things like Beast and Robin Hood, as well as even some of the smaller characters like Ariel and Ursula, to be able to go ahead and get them off of the board with targeted removal, so she can be a great tech option. Both cards also bounceable with the Mim package to be able to use them multiple times. It is worth noting with Lady Tremaine, you can play her and then shift a second Tremaine on top of her and then bounce it with something like Fox or Snake to be able to go ahead and use her 2 more times because she's shifted on top of it. Then dragging up the rear, we have 3 Maleficent Dragons, good for removal. They're really mainly going to be good in the mirror match, or maybe in a Sapphire Ruby match where you're going really far into late turns. In most instances, they're going to end up in your Inkwell because she does cost 9. Friends on the other side, draw 2 cards is always great. You have lots of 3-drop characters in this deck that can sing it, and 4-drop characters that can sing it as well. I find myself in many instances using the Rabbit to sing Friends once he's on the board. 4 Be Prepared to go ahead and deal with that board wipe, get your opponent's characters out of your way. 1 Maui's Fishhook to go ahead and boost up those small, weak characters, kind of same as the Crab. It can also be used to give them evasive, like I mentioned before, so it can keep your characters alive going into the next turn. And then 3 Queen's Castle. If you can get Queen's Castle out after a Be Prepared, or when your opponent doesn't have a lot of characters on the board to deal with it, move some characters into it. Even having 1 turn where you're drawing extra cards can be enough to put you far enough ahead at that point in the game that there's just not a whole lot that your opponent can do about it. So really rounds out the deck. The Queen's Castle is a must to me whether you're playing Jim Hawkins or not. But those are my 4 favorite decks, the 4 top decks in my opinion for the Into the Inklands Store Championships meta. Is there another deck that you would say is top 4? Did you think that some of my tech options were not right? Are there different cards that you would play with any of these decks? Definitely go ahead and drop a comment below and let me know. But we're going to talk about one more deck. This is my kind of secret tech deck. There's a deck that I came up with, and it is a deck that is specifically anti-meta. So if you're going somewhere that's playing a lot of the 4 decks that I talked about, which is entirely possible, this anti-meta option could be something to come in with and surprise your opponents. I do think there's definitely an argument to be made for Amber Ruby Mufasa. As those who have been tuned into the channel for a while know, Amber Ruby Mufasa is not my design. However, Mufasa Kicker is. And we're going to talk about that deck one more time. We're not going to spend as much time touching on the cards. If you want the full breakdown of Mufasa Kicker, definitely go ahead and check it out. I'll link it on screen, but we talk way more about some of the combos you can do and what you can accomplish with this deck in that video, so definitely check that out if you haven't seen it. But basically, we're looking at running 4 Plutos to rush stuff out, 4 Docks to continue to rush stuff out, giving the option to play something like Mufasa or Rey on turn 3 of the game. We also have lines to go ahead and shift Stitch on turn 3 of the game with protection on the board, and a Pluto to make our next character cheaper. Bare Necessities and Ursula to rip those early songs out of their hand that are going to be how they want to deal with these characters when we aren't exerting them. Simba to keep our characters from dying. Perdita to recur all of those wonderful 1 and 2 drops in this deck. Stitch to crack them off for some extra drawing, and Surfer to go ahead and get even more drawing. It'd be a big hit for Mufasa in the late game. Genie to deal with tempo, Kit to deal with tempo, Hades to get your big hits back, Rapunzel to continue to draw. Just has answers for everything. Being able to come down and go turn 1 Pluto, turn 2 Stitch, Ursula, rip a song is gross. Turn 1 Pluto, turn 2 Stitch, Simba to protect everything, also gross. The deck is very cool. Like I said, check it out if you're interested. But Mufasa Kicker could be that meta disruptor that you're looking for if you don't want to play a meta deck at this week's set championships. So like I said, throw those comments below. Let me know what you're going to play. Let me know if you think these decks are awesome, if they gave you any new ideas for how you're going to change your deck. I always love to hear from you guys. And what's more, this is going to be the video that starts comments for the next giveaway. So drop a comment below if you want us to give away another playmat and get entered into it. And if you want us to give away 2 playmats, this time it's going to be Treasure Planet themed. So we'll go ahead and throw the playmat art up on screen because it is finished. If you would like to win one of these playmats, they are on order, they are on the way in. Definitely drop a comment below, and we'll just put the extra caveat that if this video gets to 100 likes, we'll be giving away 2 playmats. So help us on the road to 900 subscribers, 1,000 subscribers. We're gonna be doing that booster box giveaway. Stick around for more deck tech, more gameplay, and more Lorcana everything in the very near future. Thanks so much for spending time with me. And remember, when you see those toys, video games, and awesome deck lists off in the distance, it is not a mirage. You guys have a great day.